All right, I've been pushing this movie for almost 2 months now. So many of you have told me that you went out to see it, then you brought more people to see it with you, so you too could join me in feeling like the yes, haha, yes, sicko meme. But it's finally time to talk about The Substance. The latest movie by French director Coralie Fargeat, known previously for her fantastic film Revenge, and this one is absolutely wild. And honestly, The Substance can only be described as the communal viewing experience of 2024. It just kind of like spreads like a little disease. You watch it, you're mind blown on this wild journey you just went to, and then you bring more people to go watch it, and then they sit there looking horrified while you sit off in the corner being like, it's the beauty of cinema bringing this all together. Then you casually put on your pump it up headband halfway through the runtime to like really make it an interactive viewing experience. That's just me? Okay. But The Substance is a wildly absurd, satirical, but still horrific body horror about a woman desperately trying to hold on to her youth as she's pushed out of Hollywood for someone newer and younger. But if you want to pump up your internet like Sue pumps up the fitness routines, look no further than today's sponsor, Surfshark. I know I'd be using it before I looked into any of this Substance stuff. Surfshark VPN lets you connect to any one of their thousands of different server locations around the world, so your internet thinks you're in that location while also helping protect your data. So for example, I wanted to rewatch Woman of the Hour for the first time since I saw it back at TIFF 2023 because it was released on Netflix, but apparently that didn't include Canadian Netflix even though it was picked up at a Canadian film festival. Well, frick you guys, all I had to do was connect to a US server location and boom, I was good to go with Anna Kendrick's directorial debut. Surfshark is my go-to when accessing streaming services when away from home, taking advantage of all my YouTube premium services, which I found out just don't work in some countries, keeping me more secure on public Wi-Fi, and when I want to look up things for videos that I don't want influencing my algorithm. So try out Surfshark for yourself today. It's fast, secure, blocks unwanted ads, works across unlimited devices, and if you go to surfshark.com/Jedi, you can get an additional 4 months completely free. I did my spoiler-free rundown on the movie in my TIFF video, but I'll give a few more of those spoiler-free thoughts here before urging anyone remotely interested in watching this movie to catch it in theaters if you still can. It is now officially on Mubi, which is why I was waiting to make this video. And even if you end up not enjoying it, the movie is not for the faint of heart, or just some people just aren't gonna like this. I will say that, once this thing ramps up, it does not slow down and it'll either really work for you or it won't, but it is an amazing ride nonetheless. And hopefully by the end of that ride, in the moments of cheering and the hollering and the horror and disgust, you're just kind of left with this deep sadness and horror at the hate so many people have towards themselves, the lengths we go to avoid the inevitable. Because so much of this movie hinges on the self-hate our main character has towards herself, and those end up being the hardest moments to watch, just Elisabeth looking in the mirror, judging herself because of things that are inescapable and unchangeable due to weird world standards. But the basic story is that celebrity Elisabeth Sparkle is being forcibly aged out of her career when she comes across a mysterious drug that promises to make her a younger, more beautiful, more perfect version of herself. Everything she just lost is being promised back to her, but even if you escape the physical aspects of yourself, the self-hatred is not going anywhere, to devastating consequences. It takes place in this weird alt-present reality Hollywood that got stuck in the 80s for entertainment. Like, no one seems to use the internet, but there are cell phones, and it shows snow on the Walk of Stars, but they still use newspaper ads to hire people. I really do love movies that feel like they're lost in time. It's also just a really simple way to establish, like, hey, there's gonna be some weird things in this movie that we're not gonna go like way over the top trying to explain, because this is the premise we're setting up and here's the ride we're gonna take you on. And while we're very focused on this one person's particular battle with herself, it's absolutely commenting on the wider societal issues of beauty standards and the violence towards the self that so often come from those things, particularly in women. It feels like you can't win no matter how you age or how you try to stop the aging, but you still can't stop yourself from trying, and it's only worse in that celebrity sphere where there's like so much criticism and so many eyes on you at all times. Pretty clear why there's been a lot of Ozempic jokes going around with this. It's just so easy to get stuck in this vicious cycle where you're just not even seeing reality anymore, and like nothing you can do would ever be good enough, and you can't even like accurately see what you look like in a mirror. I know Courtney Cox has been super vocal about the issues she's had with fillers and other anti-aging procedures, and I really do feel like I can think of some people in mind that we might hear similar things from in the next few years, and it's just really sad to see how these amazing, gorgeous, powerful women get pulled into these horrible mindsets that like none of us are really exempt from. So combine those aging issues with the wildly outrageous beauty standards found online and in social media, it's even starting to push people in their young 20s to start getting work done. It is really no wonder that people can't get ahead of this before flipping so much of that right back on the audience who, whether we like it or not, play into so many of those societal standards. I've tragically seen a lot of people say this movie is shallow because of how over the top and obvious it is, but that is the point. It's all so incredibly obvious, and I can tell you this right now, but we're still all gonna fall into it. I'm still gonna fall into it. Elisabeth can't escape the self-hate cycle that she's in because that's what the world put on her, and it's what it's putting on all of us. It's never hiding, but we still can't change it. And even based on my first watch, when I felt that it peaked right before its grand finale, I just think it's engaging with the topic so incredibly well. And honestly, the more times I see it, that big over-the-top ending actually feels more necessary just to complete the statement it's making. And other than the wild execution to a very relevant topic, this thing is just stylish as hell. It plays a lot of visual homage to other classics, but still feels so incredibly unique. Like, there's shots that feel like they're mirroring Mina Suvari in American Beauty on the bed, bathrooms and hallways from The Shining, lip close-ups like Videodrome. The fly in Quaid's drink kind of feels like it has to be a nod to Cronenberg's The Fly, which this obviously shares a lot of commonality with. We get some Psycho, some Sixth Sense, so many little Easter eggs to catch. The disgusting close-ups that are honestly mostly of Dennis Quaid, the sound design making it impossible to escape things even when you close your eyes, the incredible practical effects, the music. There's just such a strong director vision in this movie, and again, I really appreciate it. It has been a great year for that with things like I Saw the TV Glow, It's What's Inside, Challengers, and more. Career best performances out of Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, even though she always has my heart with Sanctuary. French female directors are honestly just doing it different, but I can't understate the incredible performance of Demi Moore in this movie. She shines the most in the moments where things aren't even that overtly visually disturbing. It's just the moment where you just fully see that self-hate seeping in. It is so heartbreaking, but also can't shy away from Margaret. Margaret did a fantastic job in this. The big finale at the end is like all her in prosthetics, so that alone deserves the like, you did so good. So the movie sets us up perfectly, you know, just kind of starts with a little examination of what's to come. An egg yolk being injected with something before splitting off in two, before cutting to an overshot of a Hollywood star being placed for Elisabeth Sparkle, her accolades, success in entertainment. Then showing as it evolves through the year, people excited to see the star for themselves, then commenting that it's someone that their parents like, to mostly being ignored and completely forgotten. But she is still running her show, Sparkle Your Life, looking better than me right now, a queen. God, I need to sparkle my life. But then she hears the most disgusting man you could possibly imagine, who maybe didn't have to do that much acting to pull off being a dickhead, shit-talking her at a urinal with a plan to replace her. And he does tell her that she's being let go over a disgusting meal of shrimp that just might be the grossest part of this movie. It's just him eating shrimp. And it's the second this meeting is over, as she's driving home, heartbroken, that she witnesses her face being ripped off a billboard that leads to a car accident. And the accident is so damn violent that you're just kind of like, oh, this must be why she gets access to some experimental procedure from like the violent, like how bad this car accident ended up being. But like, no, she walks away completely fine somehow. But it's in the hospital while she's having a breakdown, certainly not feeling as lucky as the doctor's making her seem. This young nurse does an additional test and leaves her with the information for the substance, with a simple message of, it changed my life. And we'll come to learn that there's many ways a life can be changed, and not all of them are good. And the pitch for this thing is pretty sick. Like, I love the slow zoom in on the TV until it's like an ad being played for the viewer. It's a little scary. You get that like weird little sterile voice, but it's interesting enough to make you wonder if maybe it'll be the solution to all your problems.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself?
The basics. You are the matrix. The substance enters you, takes your DNA, and then releases the best possible version of yourself based on that DNA out into the world. But you need to share. For 1 week, you have to be the same old version of yourself, and the next, the so-called perfect version of you. And it is very important to remember, this is not a different person splitting off from you. It's all you.
You are one. You can't escape from yourself.
A major lesson here. You can try to escape the physical aspects of your vanity, but you can't escape the thoughts and feelings that got you there. It's the whole treating the symptom and not the source type thing. So after going on a little bit of a job loss bender, getting flowers that say you were amazing, all topped off with seeing an ad in the paper looking to replace her not even 24 hours later, she bundles up in her iconic yellow jacket, makes her way to this sketchy abandoned building that makes way for an entirely too sterile and white room with P.O. boxes, and it seems like only 2 people are currently taking the substance, and takes off with box 503, which is filled with factory sealed steps. We got an activator agent that specifies multiple times that it is single use only, like Chekhov's gun. Food for you and the other self, a transfer tube, and a stabilizer kit. So much fun science!
Yes, science!
And this process is a lot more violent than I think a lot of people were expecting visually. The other version of herself literally splits out of her back, then has to stitch the now comatose matrix version of herself back together. And they show it in excruciating devastating detail. This is the violence she is inflicting on herself for the chance at getting something back after she feels all of her confidence has been sucked away. What she's willing to put herself through not to feel the way she does. And while I can't show most of this because they are nude, the Margaret Qualley reveal is so good. Like the disorientation POV shot before she sees herself in the mirror is so good. Then just how she's perceiving herself, the direct comparisons to the way she was just looking at herself in the mirror. I saw some people say that there was like an over focus on the body here, and they do. It's a lot of focus in full detail, but that has two purposes. One, her seeing herself the way she wishes she could still be and just kind of being amazed at the opportunities she's now seeing in front of herself. And two, so they can flip that gaze back on us later when it destroys the perceived beauty that comes from the result of that violence. Because this is also when the stabilizer comes into play. The other self can't survive without what I assume to be spinal fluid from the Matrix, so that has to be harvested. Again, can't really show that because it's gross, and then injected into yourself daily, otherwise the other self starts to implode. I really just can't stress how well this movie lays out the rules and consequences. And this is where I really feel it shows how stuck she is mentally. See, my mind when thinking about how they'd have to switch week on and off, I was like, okay, I guess Elisabeth could pretend to be this young and up-and-coming star's manager or something and use her knowledge to launch two careers at the same time, essentially, and go further than she was before. Fuck the Harveys, great name twist for him, of the world. Make your own empire, ladies, but no. Instead, she just goes to the audition to be her own replacement. She wants what she lost back, which is literally just putting her right back in the same position she was already in. She has been so mentally affected by these systems that the thought of getting out of it didn't even occur to her. She just wanted the validation from the people who shut her out. Playing into the same old shitty people and institutions that have no business criticizing other people's appearance. They're not criticizing hers though. She's Sue. She's perky. She's happy. She's perfect, and this shitbag loves her. So much so that he's willing to deal with the fact that she needs to go out of town every other week to take care of her mother.
I want you.
And it's a whirlwind week of show prep, routine work, photo shoots, a billboard right outside her apartment. But just like that, 7 days are up and it's time to switch. And because her focus was 100% on just getting back what she used to be and used to have, this Elisabeth has literally nothing to do or hope for or focus on for the next 7 days, just rotting in front of the TV until it's time to switch back. And this is where we get the animosity. She gets back in Sue and there starts to be a mental divide. Sue thinks Elisabeth is a little bit pathetic for just watching TV all week, but again, they are the same person. It's why they can only exist one at a time. It's just the high of being Sue makes so many of those consequences not seem that bad, and because she's so disgusted by herself and felt the need to use this experimental procedure, it makes sense that she'd continue to hate herself once she's in Sue. One conscious, two experiences leading to different forms of expression. Because she's not the one in Elisabeth at the moment as Sue, there's a lot more of that like direct hatred towards this other self, even though it's you. You can even see it in the way they do their shows. Like Sparkle Your Life definitely seemed like a positive aerobic show to stay fit and love yourself, where Pump It Up definitely feels like it'll have a very even demographic of people trying to follow along and people very much sitting with one hand occupied. It's the gaze, like the gaze. And in a way that almost feels like a little fuck you, she ends off her segment the same way Elisabeth used to with, remember, take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
And the excitement of it all is just too much for Sue to deny. While she should be at home prepping to switch back, she goes out and brings someone home, getting right down to the end of the Matrix food, which means she's also overstayed her stabilizing agent. Once again, reminding us very quickly that you have to switch without exception. But instead of doing that, she just grabs a little bit more stabilization fluid to get her through the night, and that instantly has consequences. By taking extra time and youth on one end, one of Elisabeth Finger's ages by decades, and there's nothing to be done about it.
There's been a slight misuse of the substance.
What has been used on one side is lost on the other side.
You must respect the balance. Also feeling some drug allegories here, like how you feel when you're using versus what it's taking from your brain and body outside that. But again, all of this just adds to the animosity and anger. Even though it is her living that Sue life, she can't tap into it as Elisabeth, and it sparks the anger towards Sue. Well, Sue just has this disgust for what Elisabeth is choosing to do with her time. It's also right around here that she runs into an old man who is clearly the Matrix for the young nurse who gave her the information about the substance.
It's long, isn't it? 7 days.
He is 207. Now, the thing with him is that even in this fictional, weird, timeless world, I refuse to believe that there's any hospital in any reality that would let a nurse do 1 week off and 1 week on, but still. I feel like parts of this scene get a little bit overdramatic, but it kind of feels like a bridge gap to just be like, okay, we are going to start veering into a direction that is very over the top, and we're just prepping you for it. But I like that it shows what she's setting herself up for, just miserable for weeks of solitude and loneliness for decades until she dies, while in her case, she gets to see someone else live out her dream that even though it is her, she can't enjoy in those off weeks. And every time they switch, it's almost like they isolate as themselves a little bit more and more.
It gets harder to remember that you still deserve to exist.
I know a lot of people were wondering what his motivation was for setting someone else with a substance, but I think there's a good chance he's a fan of Elisabeth's career and wanted to share that with her.
I wish you the best.
Not quite realizing the fate he was sailing to her. But she does have a little glimmer of hope here in Fred, the guy she used to go to school with that gave her his number outside the hospital as Elisabeth. And this is what I truly believe to be the hardest part of this movie to watch. She gets all ready for her date, but then she sees Sue and instantly goes back to try and fix her face some more, fancy up her lips, cover more skin. Then she tries to leave and sees the billboard and goes back to redo it all again as we see the minutes just ticking by on the wall before she just violently rubs it all off her face. This is so hard to watch because it's that violence and self-hatred that is so palpable. Like, no matter what someone else tells her how beautiful they think she is, it can't beat what her own mind is telling her. And that kicks off the binge eating, and you'll notice that the more hostile they are towards each other mentally, the more hostile their weird transition dreams seem to be. Like Sue thinking there was a chicken wing inside her that popped out during recording. Again, don't think I can show it because it popped out of her butt cheek. Only adding to the disgust Sue feels towards Elisabeth when she wakes up to a trashed apartment, so she just feels like she spends all of her weeks working her ass off, literally, and Elisabeth is just doing nothing.
She wastes 7 days stuffing her face in front of the TV!
I also think the use of food here is interesting in terms of women's relationship with it and how it goes hand in hand with those beauty standards. Elisabeth goes from not really eating anything to using it as a form of punishment and vengeance, both for herself and Sue. Just another aspect that makes this also sad. But all her hard work is paying off. They want to move Pump It Up to primetime spots, and they want her to host their big New Year's Eve event. And that all requires a lot of prep, so she takes a little bit of extra time, then a little bit more, then a little bit more. So now it's half of Elisabeth's body that's suffering the consequences, and it also seems like it's taking a toll and aging her brain as well. Which is when she gets a simple offer.
Would you like to stop?
She can end it all right now, terminate the other self, and just go back to being as she is, alone. But that's not really what she wants to do right now, both because the body toll has been so extreme at this point and because she can't stand to be without the highs Sue is providing, though I will note it's interesting that this was not offered to her until it hit a point where they perceived it as being like too far gone for her to probably want to switch back. But yeah, she's just too addicted to those highs that she can get while being Sue, even when the Sue self is on national television shit-talking Elisabeth's career in a very diplomatic way.
We're not exactly from the same generation. My mother was a huge fan of hers, so in a way I grew up with her, whether I liked it or not.
Again, a perfect display of that animosity and disdain for the self. Not learning to be kinder, but just attacking with the same standards being held against you. They are literally the same person, but she hates the fact that she has to also be Elisabeth as Elisabeth is. The way Elisabeth hates everything that Sue is, even though it's everything she wants. I've also seen a lot of people say that this scene feels like a mother and daughter, where the mother feels like she's given everything to the child and tries to live vicariously through that child, but then doesn't feel appreciated. For me, so much of this just feels like the way women compete against each other rather than putting the blame and criticism where it belongs on the larger institutions at play or even just the individuals that are creating the environment. Kind of like when someone gets mad at the other woman or dude when that person might not even be aware that they were the other person and they should be mad at the partner that actually cheated on them. And that violence against the self here is just really ramping up. It's going from the internalized to also just reflecting on her physically bashing her head into the ground. It's very heartbreaking as her shower just becomes these 4 solid walls, like she can't escape what's happening. And while it is entirely the Sue self's fault that she's had this mental collapse because she kept taking more time, she is pissed.
Control yourself!
Because yeah, she left this whole place a total disaster, and it's enough for her to just mass harvest as much of the stabilizer as she can to just be Sue forever. So that's going to be terrible. There was a very specific set of rules. You just need to follow them. You need to respect the balance. And it's very short-sighted because I'm guessing that body's going to need a refill at some point, and I bet it doesn't do it. Well, it's comatose. And yeah, she runs out 3 months later, the day before the New Year's show. Again, to clarify, there is no world where the other self can exist without the Matrix, so she has to switch back. Which obviously has horrendous outcomes with a near unrecognizable Elisabeth who has bone growths, hunched over, lost hair. So now, after all this, she has decided she is ready to end the experience and gets her termination kit. Honestly, all bundled up like this, she's looking a little bit like a Miyazaki grandma. So she starts the termination process and almost instantly regrets it. She only loves herself as Sue because Sue is who the world loves and that's all she cares about. So she immediately tries to stop it, doesn't finish injecting, starts reviving her, does the transfer tube, which sets off some kind of glitch to split the consciousness between them. But this Sue is like a feral animal, a body of rage more than a person when she realizes what Elisabeth was trying to do on the day she was about to hit it big, so she just beats the shit out of her. And honestly, I love this scene. I know it's so violent and brutal and horrible, but anytime I can see Margaret Qualley committing violence while screaming is a great day for me. But again, it's brutal. This is the kind of violence that only comes from pure hate, and it's a hate that's completely unwarranted, a hate stemming from misplaced value and vanity. So I wanted to wait until we hit this peak, but it definitely feels like there's some heavy inspiration from a picture of Dorian Gray here. She literally has a giant picture of herself as the centerpiece of her home from her prime that she damages the night she called for the substance because she literally felt taunted by her own past self. Always leering at Elisabeth and Sue as a constant reminder of what's been done. In Dorian Gray, he makes this deal for his soul to have the painting wither while he maintains his beauty, which feels paralleled with Elisabeth withering away while Sue gets to go on and live her life of beauty and indulgence. And like Dorian Gray, where actions to the self affect the painting and vice versa, we've seen the exchanging effects in Elisabeth and Sue. So I just really like that, and it feels like we're coming back full circle with the picture. In this moment though, Sue beats Elisabeth to death, and there's this distinct physical reaction, most likely because the other self can't survive without that matrix. Something Sue couldn't even think to care about at the time, even though the preservation of Elisabeth was necessary to preserve everything she as Sue gained. And the short-sightedness of that feels like very relevant to how aggressively people try to maintain these beauty standards when they are, by nature, fleeting. So if you only value yourself based on how the world values your looks, it's not sustainable, and Sue's about to find herself on the other side of that. Almost immediately while getting ready for the New York show, her teeth start to fall out.
Smile!
Great save, you're crushing it, sweaty. And then her ear falls off, and all this is just showing that like no one around her even really cares to notice what's going on with her. They just care about what she can provide them. So the only thing she can think to do to stop this is to use the activator serum again. Chekhov's gun, baby! And the result? More horrific than I ever could have expected. Because now there's no matrix, it's just taking DNA from a copy. It has nothing tangible to work with, just fleeting memories and emotions, and the result is Monstro Elisasue, who I must note is just Margaret Qualley under a ton of prosthetics that must have been completely miserable and so hard to breathe in, so just a round of applause for that. So this is where a lot of people get off on the ride for the movie, and while I get it, it works for the themes, and at least it's going there, it commits. So we just have this monstrosity of different body parts, some Sue, a full Elisabeth face stuck open on the back, teeth all over, awkward growths, mouths within mouths. And because the brain seems to have descended into this like most basic form it could, she just starts to get herself all dolled up, and it is the burning of the scraggly hair for me. But this is also the first moment of genuine tenderness we've seen any version of Elisabeth show herself. No longer the self-hate from Elisabeth or the lurid vanity of Sue, it's just pure. She's gonna go out there and show the world who she is for her and no one else. Though Kent and I completely lost it when I realized she was gonna glue the face from her portrait on her face before going on stage. Airtight plan, no one will notice a thing. But she does somehow make it on stage, which is also still very weird because all the backing dancers are topless and it's like a televised event, but it's just like very interesting as they all slowly realize what's standing next to them. And this is obviously where we completely go further off the rails. Her trying to give an earnest speech before we get a call callback to what those dudes said before it was her turn to audition.
Too bad her boobs aren't in the middle of her face instead of that nose.
And a boob literally comes out of one of her face orifices. I know Fargeat said the design was supposed to be like a Picasso of male expectations, the results of trying to remain valuable to those external forces. And yeah, she committed to that, leading to the full old school monster movie freakout. While she desperately pleads for them to see that it's still her, she's who she always was, but that self-realization just comes a little bit too late. And then her arm breaks and she just starts to geyser blood into the audience. Hey, he said people wanted more of her.
They want more and more and more of you.
And that's exactly what they're getting. Now, while it's obviously an insane spectacle, this is also the moment where it's all being flipped on the audience for us daring to gawk before. This is the result of the violence that we've helped inflict. Everything we've projected outwards as a society, the standards we've unintentionally played into and upheld, is coming right back at us again in the most over-the-top way imaginable. Monstro Elisasue, according to Fargeat, is the piece of ourselves we all try to hide, the pieces we don't feel fit in, the things we're afraid to let the world see, and the fear we have of being held to certain standards. So through all this absurdity is something so sad, how far these ideals pushed her to become this disoriented combination of a person fearing the loss of beauty with the person who already feels like she lost everything. When she was already a certified legend with a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, it's just the feeling of having her relevancy taken from her that pushed her to the extremes because it felt so much like death to her. Then somehow in the most violently grotesque iteration of the self became something more willing to accept herself for who she is, to be kind to herself, while then tragically exploding into nothing more than a face trapped in ooze. With her final act being to drag herself right to that Hollywood star, with the final memories being of all the people that propped her up, that loved her, a smile on her face before melting into nothing. As Fargeat put it, this whole final act is really the first time Elisabeth's ever been free from her body and appearance, free of all the things that built that self-hatred, to finally be able to appreciate herself for who she is. Again, in the most tragic of ways, it shouldn't have had to come back to memories of former glory before ceasing to exist. And that's really the movie, the remnants of her being cleaned off the star to perfection to bring us full circle back to that intro, making itself a cautionary tale to not fall into these harsh beauty standards while fully acknowledging that they feel inescapable, so not holding it against anyone who does get trapped. A scathing critique of how the entertainment industry treats women and what we feel we need to do to try and maintain youth to be respected, while also acknowledging that youth and beauty doesn't even really gain respect. It's just another commodity of value to be used by someone else. The way it feels like you can't win no matter what you do to slow or change the aging process, or even if you do nothing at all, you're still gonna get criticized for that. And how miserable it is to be aware of all these things and still fall into it at every level. To bring it back to the movie, you just so desperately want Elisabeth to stop, but she just can't, whether it's the moment in the mirror getting ready for a date or just continuing to barrel down this path with the substance. It just won't stop. It's a brutal cycle that'll continue as long as people like Harvey are able to thrive and be in control and treat people as replaceable. And those are all the reasons why this really worked for me. Like, I can understand why this might get away from some people and be too weird in areas, why it might feel a bit too long for some people, how some of the spectacle and grotesque imagery could make people lose sight of what it's actually trying to say. But I still think it juggles it all really well to deliver both on its message and as a solid movie experience. Also, I just want to shout out a movie that makes for like a really good double feature with this called A Different Man with Sebastian Stan, yeah, that rhymes, and Adam Pearson. Very similar themes, and both of them really commit to going off the wall. So please let me know what you guys are thinking down below. I really hope I'm not too late to this, but I really didn't want to make the video while there was like a leaked copy around to like unintentionally encourage people to track that down. I wanted to wait until it was like legally available on Mubi, which it is right now. So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members. Thanks as always to Surfshark for being a regular sponsor on this channel. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.